What's up, everybody? My name is SuperScudge, and welcome to the first video in my series of tutorials for minor glitches in A Link to the Past. In this one I'm going to cover the item dash glitch. This glitch is exclusive to the Japanese 1.0 version of the game. So if you're playing on a later revised Japanese version or any of the non-Japanese versions, you probably won't be able to do this glitch. I guess the first thing I should do is probably just simply explain what an item dash is and how to execute it. An item dash is pretty accurately named. You're simply using an item and dashing at the same time. And the execution is pretty simple. You simply press the item button and the dash button on the same frame. On a normal Super Nintendo controller, that's going to be the Y button and the A button, but if you're using a keyboard or some other input device, hopefully you already know which button is which. The physical technique I like to use is to use my index finger and middle finger and just hit the two buttons at the same time. Pretty simple. I know some people like to use different fingers, like the middle and ring finger, or maybe the index and the ring finger. If you find that easier, then do however feels comfortable for you. There's no real correct technique there. I think some people even try to use only their thumb, which I guess you have to have a pretty skinny thumb for that to work. But if it works, it works. So no shame there. I guess I'll go over the differences between some of the different item dashes and then just show a few applications. Since the applications are really limitless, it's just a matter of the limits of your own imagination, really. I can't show all of them, but I'll show a few. First, I'll talk about the differences between different ranged items and how item dashes work with them. With the boomerang, one of the most important aspects of this is that the boomerang does not actually start traveling away from Link's sprite until the same time that Link starts moving. So you can see it just sort of hovers over his head until right when he starts moving, then it moves with him. You can't change directions while charging the dash, so to throw the boomerang in a different direction than you intend to dash is actually makes this technique a little bit more difficult. Okay, to do this you want to face the direction that you want to dash, and then you need to press the D-pad input in the direction that you want to throw the boomerang, and A and Y all in the same frame. It's not terribly easy. With some practice you can gain some consistency with it, but you can see that's what it should look like. I'm pressing down A and Y all at the same time in order to do that. If the direction that you want to throw the boomerang is at a 45-degree angle, oriented away from the direction that Link's facing, for example, if I'm facing north and I want to throw it northeast or northwest, then you actually only have to hold the D-pad direction and then start the item dash. And it'll work. It'll throw in that direction, and then you'll start the dash in the correct direction. The important thing here is to let go of the D-pad after you start the dash, otherwise you will immediately stop your dash and just start walking. With other items, like for example the fire rod or the ice rod, you can actually start the dash animation and then change directions. So if you want to light a torch and then immediately dash afterwards, it can be a little more efficient to do an item dash as opposed to throwing the fire rod and then dashing, just because you're likely to move a little bit before you start the dash. We call those human error frames, the amount of frames it takes to start your dash after performing another action. So the fire rod dash pretty much just eliminates human error frames when your intention is to use the fire rod and then dash afterwards. Painted Samari is kind of similar. You can actually set the block with an item dash or blast it with an item dash, and those can have different beneficial effects. The bow is different from all the others in that you actually dash with the item sort of loaded. It sort of stops halfway through its animation, and then when you stop the dash it actually fires. And for that reason, using the bow for an item dash is generally ineffective. It's mostly done for style. It's really hard to find a way to use the bow dash to actually save time, but it is still a stylish thing to do. Alright, so to go into some detail about just a few applications, I want to start with the boomerang dash. Normally when you come into this room, obviously these tiles are going to be flying at you. I decided to let them all expend themselves before I started to explain this, just so I had a little more time to relax in here. But one of the ways to save time in this room, or to save yourself a little trouble, is to land on top of these pigs while the tiles are still flying, and then they can't damage you because the pigs are giving you invulnerability. Alright, so the way we're going to want to execute this, if we try to just throw the boomerang and then dash, there's not even close to enough time to get there. So we're going to want to execute an item dash. And as I mentioned earlier, the boomerang doesn't actually start to leave Link's sprite until Link actually starts moving. And that's really, really useful because, as you can see, I need to travel a farther distance to get to the pegs than the boomerang needs to travel to get to the switch. But Link does move a little bit faster than the boomerang. So if I can actually execute this correctly, I can actually stop on these pegs here, and then I would have a lot of time to wait for these tiles. I can show you what that looks like if the tiles are actually flying by reloading this room. You have the boomerang in your possession and you're coming through this room. Hopefully it'll look something like this. Nice and easy. Alright, so one of the coolest uses of an item dash is the Canis Samaria dash in this room up here. We want to set this block so that it'll hit 2 switches at a delay and do an item dash. That puts us here, and we can simply dash out of the room. Alright, so I've killed the enemies in this room that would interfere with my just demonstrating how this is supposed to look. Just so you can see this slow down, you can see that the block will hit that switch when it fires north, and the west shot will hit that switch over there, assuming that anti-fairy doesn't get in the way. You don't have to do an item dash here, you can just walk. You see it hit one switch, hit the other switch, and now we're good to go. The item dash, of course, has more style, and that is an important element of the item dash for sure. So to move off of the ranged items a little bit here, the most common and most effective item dashes are the hammer dashes. And with a hammer dash, any item that you dash through, or any object I should say that you can dash through, like a pot or a peg, will be affected by the hammer as it normally would. Unfortunately, this doesn't work on enemies, so if you have a weak sword, you can't hammer dash through enemies to kill them. It only works with interactive objects. This right here is probably the single most effective use of an item dash in the entire game. And of course, hammering those pegs would open that up if it wasn't already open. So one kind of strange condition of the hammer dash is you actually need to have a sword of any level in your possession for it to work. As you can see here, I'm swinging my empty fist because I've given my sword away to the smiths. And if I hammer dash into these pegs, I'll just bounce off. You also see when you do the hammer dash, it shows a sword. I guess because it sort of knows that you have used a weapon of some kind in your dash. I don't really know. If you do a normal bonk, there is a swordless bonk animation. However, with a hammer dash, he thinks he has a sword, even though he doesn't. So the hammer dash can lead to a small graphical glitch, which really has no consequences. I just think it looks kind of cool, so I figured I might as well show it here. If you hammer dash across this pot here, and activate the switch, the pot sometimes will appear to stay there, even though it's clearly just an empty tile that you're actually interacting with. So what I figure is happening is when you lift up a pot, you know, the game doesn't really have layers. There's not actually something under the pot. It actually has to draw the empty space over top of the pot graphics and then create a pot sprite that appears in Link's hands. And also, the chest is simply another kind of overlay graphic that gets drawn into the room. So what I figure is happening is it's trying to redraw 2 tiles at the same time for separate reasons and simply prioritizes the chest, which is a good thing. If it prioritized the other tile, then the chest would be lost forever, and that would be a bad thing. But as I said, little consequences, just looks kind of cool. Another item dash that's sort of helpful is the bug catching net dash. If you've ever tried to chase down a fairy, you've probably had plenty of times where you try to swing your net at it and you miss it a few times. Maybe you even absorb it instead of capturing it. If it's in an open space and you can net dash towards it, you can actually catch it. And you saw there I caught it from pretty far away. The size of Link's hitbox when you're doing the net dash is quite large. And if the net touches if the fairy touches any part of that hitbox, then it will be captured. So that's a really effective way to close the distance between you and a fairy, and also reduce the risk of accidental absorption instead of capture. Also with the net dashes, if you find a bonkable object that releases a fairy like this statue here in the Great Swamp, and you net dash into it, you'll actually catch the fairy instantly instead of having to chase it down at all. And that's quite nice. Lets you get on your way much quicker and without having to deal with any local hazards if there happen to be any. There's a small Easter egg in the game where if you powder a bush, it'll actually destroy the bush and then drop from a randomized drop pack. There's a 5 in 8 chance of dropping nothing, and a 1 in 8 chance of each green rupee, a single heart, or a fairy drop. Luckily, when you do a powder dash through a row of bushes, that effect is applied to every bush along the way. So you can powder dash through many bushes, and if you get lucky, you can get potentially several fairy drops. Oops. In case you need a bunch of fairies for some reason, there's a few more. Really, that can actually be effective. If you just happen to be dashing around and you see a row of bushes and you switch to powder, low on hearts, maybe there's a chance you get a couple fairies, a couple hearts, and heal yourself right up. So to kind of get on the topic of useless item dashes, there is, of course, the shovel dash. I'm going to start this game, which means that any item that I use becomes the shovel. You see, I don't actually have it equipped, but that's the nature of the digging game. Unfortunately, what you'll see is I'll appear to dig an entire row of holes in a single dash, but the potential to drop only applies to the last hole of the dash. So while this may look like it would be a very effective way to win the digging game in much faster speed than usual, unfortunately you're going to see basically no drops the entire time, which is a shame, but it still looks pretty cool. So I figured I'd fit that one in here. And of course, to conclude this tutorial, I have to show something completely useless, even more useless than the shovel dash, but maybe more stylish. If you take an item dash, something that has an animation that travels with Link, so basically not the boomerang dash, and you jump off of a cliff that lands you in deep water, and then swim into shallow water, you'll slide across the shallow water with that animation. This actually will work until you jump out of the water on one of those little platforms at the bottom of some stairs, or until you take damage. Also, if you hit any solid objects while doing this glitch, if these guys don't harass me too much, I'll show you that. You'll actually get pushed in that direction and just slide forever. One more silly thing that I can show is very similar to the last one. If you do an item dash out of a door onto the overworld, the same thing basically happens except on the overworld. You'll just travel straight until something does damage to you, or until you press the Y button again. Depending on the enemy RNG, you can actually get pretty far here. It's pretty funny. I said the last thing was going to be the last thing, but I decided I want to show one more. Just because I've seen people get stuck in this loop and think that they're actually in trouble and that they can't recover from it. If you item dash with like a hammer into stairs, you'll go up the stairs and then immediately you'll get pulled back down the stairs. You won't be able to move or anything. And I've seen people get stuck here, so I figured this is important to show because there is actually a way to recover. You just gotta press Y and you'll use the hammer instead of going back down the stairs. So if that happens to you, all you gotta do is use the item one more time and you'll be fine. Well, I think that just about does it for this tutorial. Hopefully you learned something new, and maybe you'll be inclined to try out new item dashes. Maybe you'll find some cool new application that's never before been seen. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.